Welcome to Trinity Radio. You have found the Christian channel that loves atheists. But today I have someone with me who definitely loves atheists, gives atheists a platform on a regular basis. I am speaking today with the voice of one of the most popular worldview discussion channels. It's a neutral platform, as they always say. But I've got the voice of modern day debate with me here, James Coons. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I was just telling you, and I'll tell everyone here that I've known about you for a long time. Obviously, you can't step into this arena of worldview discussions online without knowing about modern day debate. It's one of the few channels that I go to on a regular basis, almost on a daily basis, checking out what's going on there. And I want to also say how much I've not only personally appreciated and learned from things on that channel, but also, and it's linked in the description. Everyone should go check it out. But also you personally, even before the channel was as sizable as it is now, your channel or my channel, not that my channel is anywhere near where yours is at, you were so kind to reach out and encourage us and things. And that just meant a whole lot. So it really is an honor to have you here, James.
That means a lot. And I'm glad that you're doing apologetics on YouTube. It's well needed. And it's cool that YouTube is a global platform. You know, there are people from all over the world listening to those apologetics videos. So great job.
Yeah. So listen, what I wanted to do today is I wanted to hear a little bit about you, but then I also want to ask you some of the questions that I have about modern day debate. Some are just for my personal curiosity of what you thought about a particular debate or something like that. But really, one of the things that I think is going to be important here is in that I want to let you speak, and I know you've done this on your own channel and elsewhere about some of the more controversial things that have happened on modern day debates and get your take on how maybe a Christian ought to feel about that, or just a person with a YouTube channel ought to think about these things. And but first, let's get to know you for just a second, James. You were just telling me you're working on a degree and you're all over the place now. Modern day debate and probably life and career has got you across the map in the United States, at least. And I just want to hear a little bit about you. So how did you come to faith in Christ? Maybe that was a lifelong thing. Maybe that happened later. And well, let's just start there about your Christian testimony.
Yeah, so I grew up in a home that was a loving home, but it wasn't really a Christian home. It was my siblings that we were encouraged, we were kind of, you had to go to church when we were really young. But I think that if you were to ask myself or my family, we would have said that we were some sort of, what's the phrase? I can't remember if it's from J.P. Moreland or someone else. They had said, I think it was moralistic therapeutic deism. Is more of like this idea that we believe in a God because it's maybe comforting or maybe conveniently my ethics at the time would have aligned with a God of my own making rather than scriptural ethics. And when I was 20, I at college started thinking like, oh, I'm curious. I want to learn and understand more. And that's when I started actually reading the Bible as well as going to a Bible believing church that would uh, consistently and with Christian friends kind of learning, and became a Christian when I was 20. And that's when there was actually a turning in my behavior where it wasn't this kind of, like I said, convenient, like, well, I think it's, like, what harm is it? Where I was just kind of doing my own thing prior to that. So there was genuine repentance. And then, yeah, I think that was for me the hardest thing, more so than the apologetics type questions, was being confronted with the gospel, thinking, how could I be forgiven for all of the things I've done? That was the hardest hurdle for me, is just thinking like, oh, I really don't deserve this. I don't know if I can be forgiven. There's just a deep conviction. And apologetics was important to me because I still had many other questions, but that's it in a nutshell. So I'm 36 now, so that's about 16 years of being a Christian now.
Wow. Well, that's fantastic. And ultimately, that is the most important thing for those of us who are believers, is that you have placed your faith in Christ, turned from your sin. It doesn't mean that you're going to be perfect, but our intention is to live for him and to live in his kingdom. And so what? So it wasn't apologetics that ultimately got you, let's say, but what was it about apologetics that interested you such that you would start a channel that has now become iconic among those of us who are in this space? What led you down that path?
Yeah, so I'll mention that in a sec. Though I do want to say thank you for bringing focus to Christ in my little mini testimony, because the way I stated it, it almost sounded as if it was a works-based salvation. So I'm still waking up today, but yeah, I undoubtedly is being confronted with the gospel, the good news, and so thank you for keeping it gospel
You just
centered.
couldn't accept
And
how good it was that even the stuff that I know in my head, none of us are as good as everyone else thinks we are, or at least few of us probably are as good as everyone else thinks we are. And in our own head, we know the sort of depravity that is there. And so for any person, even if they haven't done what the world would consider these big, awful, ugly, horrible things, it's hard to accept that Christ would forgive us and love us, and God would look on us and see the sacrifice of His Son. But that's just how good the gospel is, right?
amen. It is, and I'm so 100%. God's forgiveness is big, and it's um, we have a reason to be grateful and to live in return out of love. So
Amen.
for me, becoming turning the channel into modern day debate, because when I started it was modern day hysteria, where I would cover apologetics and kind of politics, and it was my own kind of commentary video. And then modern day debate came from because during the modern day hysteria portion of time, I would go on other channels and debate. And sometimes I felt like it wasn't that neutral or fair. I kind of expected like a more official or more neutral channel. And I'm not going to name anybody, I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I would notice that the moderator, for example, would jump in pretty consistently. It's kind of systematic where they would take one side. And I was like, oh, you're never ever fact checking some of his more far fetched claims. So I thought, I'll start my own channel and that'll be the big push. And I actually started it not because I wanted, although I'm grateful and I'm like pleasantly surprised that the audience really liked the idea of like a neutral platform. That branding, having that be the center of our brand just seems to resonate with people the most based on feedback. But I originally did it because I thought we could get debaters to come on, because I thought, how am I going to get debaters to come on, especially when there are so many channels bigger than modern day debate? And sure enough, debaters appreciated it, but I was even more surprised, pleasantly surprised, that the audience was like, yeah, like that sounds cool. I like that. Everybody just across different demographics, that really resonated with people.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I don't want to break your flow, but I do want to put a pin in that because that is something that we'll come back to in a little bit. But it's important for the audience to know that, and maybe even people that watch modern day debate to know that even though you personally are a Christian, and even though obviously you're going to have your own political views and all the rest, the truth is the channel itself you felt was best served by being neutral. So it's not a secret that you're a Christian. Most of the people who watch know that you're a Christian, but this channel is not just supposed to be a pulpit. This is a neutral platform where, at least in principle, when you show up on that screen, you're going to receive all the benefits, appreciation, time that the other guy will, right?
Right. Is that we want to be right down the middle on every aspect. So we link both speakers. We we try to give them equal time, of course. That's, I think, the most important thing. I think another thing is that I want to be fair that, like, for example, Justin Brierley's done a fantastic job moderating in a fair way. And so I've listened to Unbelievable for a long time. It's not that he's in any way not neutral. It's that some people might be concerned, and maybe this is petty, so maybe not that many are concerned. If they go on an atheist channel for a debate or a Christian channel, whatever it is, they might feel like, well, I'm going on it's a debate. And even if it's moderated fairly, some of them might be concerned of like, but in a way, I'm kind of implicitly promoting this channel by going on there. Like I'm helping them produce content, right? I mean, it's necessary you have speakers for the content. And so some people maybe would be like, And I've noticed that on Twitter, where sometimes people get in a spat and they'll say, well, let's debate this. And they go, okay, great, come on my channel. And they go, I'm not going to come on your channel. You're, some
Right.
communist or whatever it is that they have the critique of.
Yeah.
And so they say, okay, fine. Well, how about this modern day debate channel? And so it's even neutral in the sense that we don't have any position statements other than that, we've kind of taken a firm stance on that we're for neutrality and we're for even hosting the controversial debates. But we haven't taken any positions on, let's say, the channel saying that X view is correct.
Yeah, and you feel like that serves the channel because you've been doing this now for years, and as far as I've been watching, you have consistently been neutral. And so, as a result, now those people know. Well, okay, I know that James happens to be a Christian, but I can feel good on this channel because he always treats everyone fair and equal. So that makes some sense. But I didn't mean to break up your flow about the channel, but I guess you kind of answered it.
No, that's good. I'm happy to. Like we'll go wherever it goes. Like this is good.
Yeah. So, okay. Let me ask this in a way to, well, first of all, do you have family? Do you have a wife? Are you married?
I'm currently single. Once I wrap up the doctorate, I think I'll have more time to. I definitely want to settle down. I am, let's see, it's really hard to date between the dissertation and modern day debate. So I plan on, once the dissertation is done, moving back to Texas and then settling down. So yeah, I do. I'm just a single guy that is, for the longest time, I've been kind of bouncing around for different cities for different degrees, which has also made it a little bit more challenging because, if you
Well,
meet
my
somebody
question
and it's
was going to be, how did you have time for all of this? And my question was also going to be, what does your wife think about it? But if there's no wife or woman in the picture right now as a significant other, then that answers that. You've got more time to fill in some of those spots where family would become super important. You can be doing work and moving around in the
that's
midst of that.
true. It
Mm-hmm.
makes, yeah, because when I do have a family, I want to spend my time with them, and so I
Mm-hmm.
will have less time for modern day debate. But I also work like crazy, and to the point where I have to change that a little bit because you can do anything too much. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I generally I'm waking up and I start getting started on work of some type, and then it's like pretty much that the whole day and almost every day. It's very I like it. I enjoy it. Like I'm excited about modern day debate. I'm excited about my doctorate, and so yeah, I think I watch about 20 minutes of Disney Plus to fall asleep at night. That's about all I do in terms of like my pure leisure. Like I'd say I probably do more than that. I take little breaks throughout the day, but it's the idea of like, so anyway, yeah.
What are you watching on
I'll have
Disney
to.
Plus? I have to know.
Right now, I'm watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. They just added the
Praise the
Indiana Jones
Lord.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are a lot of fun. But otherwise, I usually watch Marvel or Star Wars. So
Do you know
I'm a pretty
someone
big
pointed out to
nerd.
me the other day that, and we'll move on after this, but someone pointed out to me the other day that in my debate with Matt Dillahunty during the Q&A, I asked, or someone said, what do you want to believe? And he gave his answer. And I said, well, I want to believe there's going to be a fifth Indiana Jones film and that it's going to be incredible. So now there is a fifth Indiana Jones film. It remains to be seen if it's incredible, but I know I'm going to be thrilled either way.
Yeah, I have to at least watch it. I have to give it a
Yeah.
shot,
Yeah.
even if I'm
All right.
nervous.
So in case someone doesn't get too far into this, if you had to give them one debate from your channel that you'd say, look, this is the one that I tell people, hey, go check that. And maybe that's different based on their interests, but let's just say you didn't know much about their interests. You just wanted to suggest one of your debates that you think shows what you guys do really well. What debate comes to mind?
Is there good evidence for God with Mike Jones from Inspiring Philosophy, the YouTube channel, versus Matt Dillahunty? That was our
Oh,
best debate. It was everything about it was peak, where the arguments from both sides, two of the best debaters that we have on the channel, I think probably the two best. And also the production value was way better than our average. So that was shot at the Atheist Experience studio. And you have to watch that debate. It's
excellent.
definitely worth the watch.
Excellent debate. Mike did an incredible job and got Dillahunty to admit and say some things that sounded really like he was giving up more than I expected.
I agree, is that I appreciated Matt's authenticity in
Yeah.
that at the end of the debate, this is just one interpretation, is that, it almost sounded like Matt was kind of open to there being this creator, this
Just don't call
mind
it God.
behind the universe. Right. Just kind of like, I don't know what I want to call it. Uh, and so yeah, you have to watch that debate. It was so good just because, like I said, you're absolutely right. The debate eventually came to the point of where it's like, what are we going to call this thing?
Right,
It was
right.
good.
Yeah, we've all discovered God here tonight, but what are we going to call it instead of God? That's not fair, but I'll tell you what, you should listen to the debate. And I did a debate review of that debate on this channel, so people can go check out after they see the debate right here on Trinity Radio. Yeah.
100%.
Um, so, okay, so that is an awesome debate. I really, really did enjoy that one. Um, Now, is there a debate that looking back on it, you wish you hadn't done? Like after it was over, you thought, I don't know, man, that was a train wreck. That didn't help anybody. Is there a debate that comes to mind like that?
Yeah, let's see.
And maybe you
Man,
don't
I'd
want to
say
say so because you don't want to insult the debaters.
oh,
Yeah.
I can't remember his name anyway. There's a gentleman that I think had to be trolling us, where I don't think he was sincerely defending a some sort of new age position that I don't think he was even really believed in it. It got so far fetched to him like trying to conjure up like cooked chickens in his hands. It was weird, and it
What?
was really that was really long ago. Uh, we haven't had him on again, but it was that's where I was like, okay, is this wasting? Is a complete waste of time? Because there's something more. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with devil's advocate debates, but our audience has always enjoyed the debates. They haven't gone for those. We tried it before and they didn't go for it. I think there's something about competition that's entertaining and fun. And by the way, I think that sometimes competition gets like a bad word, a bad connotation, especially in the context of debate and discussing ideas, which I don't. I would push back against because I think it's true you could be competitive such that you're not listening to the other person's arguments, but I don't think that necessarily follows. You could be intently listening. And in fact, if you're really competitive and you're a good debater, you have to. Because if you don't address their arguments directly and refute them, you're kind of giving them ground in the debate in terms of
Yeah,
them
you're
being more
tacitly
persuasive.
conceding whatever they said. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like that cliche of I don't like debate because when you're debating, you're only thinking about what you're going to say next. You're not listening to the actual person. And I'm like, that like doesn't follow at all. Like if you're a bad debater, that would be true. But so yeah, I think our culture is a little bit too polite. I think that we've gone you can have, like I said earlier, you can have too much of anything. And I think that politeness is one of those things where eventually it gets to the point of where like, oh, debate, it's, like someone's trying that, like, oh, they're saying that someone else's position is wrong and that theirs is right. How bad? And I'm like, is it bad? And I'm like, I don't see why that's bad. I don't doesn't bother me if an atheist or a Muslim or whoever it is tells me like I'm wrong and they're right. I'm like, okay, it's like what you think doesn't bother me. But for some reason our culture I think is hyper polite in terms of, oh, that's too far for some people.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And as a Christian, I'm with you. I don't have a problem with someone telling me I'm wrong. I don't have a problem hearing an atheist told they're wrong or a Muslim told they're wrong. Now, this does get into, we're kind of buttering up to kind of some of the things that I wanted to ask you about specifically. And I want people to hear you talk about this. You have talked about these sorts of things publicly before. This is not unique to us, but if I recommend, when I do recommend modern day debate, and I have recommended it to so many people, some people, some of the time, I do add a little bit of an asterisk next to it. And what I say is this is a great channel, but there are a couple of things that I might want people to know, especially if they're not used to online debates. And that is, you have had some very out there type topics and therefore some very out there type debaters. So for
Mm.
instance, you've done certain things that we do see in the worldview space every now and then. You've done the flat earth discussion multiple times, I think. And I
Right.
can see how that could be super interesting. You've done Bigfoot, and I can see how that could be interesting. In fact, I did watch the Bigfoot one. Um, One that comes to mind, though, as a question that I wonder in your mind, and I know there have been some people who've said this, is when it comes to specifically things like uh, white supremacy or things like that, close to that. Um, there could be someone say, okay, look, atheists and Christians and a lot of other worldviews could all sit around and agree with you, and we all kind of could agree like that's evil, and we don't want to promote that, um, and don't want it to make it look give it more influence than it otherwise would have. And yet you are saying all these things about how everyone it should be neutral. Everyone's got a chance to at least speak and have their views exposed and discussed. But I think you did get some criticism. I'd just like to hear your response to that and kind of how you think about, and maybe your opinions have changed over time. I don't know. Floor is yours.
Yeah, glad you asked, because it is a question that I take seriously. So for me, there are a couple of factors. Well, one really quick like prerequisite is that we technically, and I'm not saying this as a defense of myself because I think it's not getting at the core issue yet, but just to be sure that everybody's on the same page, that we technically haven't hosted like a debate on white supremacy per se, because YouTube would give us the boot. We've always avoided topics that you would say we're kind of cutting off the branch that we're sitting on, in the sense that YouTube would potentially kick us off the platform or give us a strike. However, it is true that we have hosted what I think it would be fair to, as I understand it, we have hosted people that seem to be bona fide white supremacists. And I'm I've hosted them knowing that was the case. And the reason that I have is because I think that, kind of in that spirit of competition that I mentioned, I think that the arguments against white supremacists, you could say the anti-Nazi type arguments, are stronger than the arguments for some sort of neo-Nazi positions that are out there today. So when we've hosted these people, it'll be on more peripheral topics like race and crime, let's say. So not white supremacy per se, but
I got
the
you.
idea is
Okay.
when we, and that's a peripheral like point. So I want to, it's
Yeah, in other
just so
words, you
people
are
know though that,
you're bringing out what you want to make clear is even if people who are those things have ended up on the channel debating, they weren't directly debating that question. And so
right.
we may have been platforming them, but not that question. And we were platforming them so that they could present pushback on, yeah, like how does it relate to crime and things like that.
Right. And like I said, I think that still that doesn't get at what most people are most upset about. Most people I think are still like, well, James, that doesn't matter that much to me. I'm just upset you had Richard Spencer or whoever it might have been, Nick Fuentes. Is the reason that we have, like I said, is I do think that the arguments against these, you could say neo-Nazi like or type arguments are better, such that I think it's a public good. Like I think that when people see these white supremacist types make their arguments and then they see the other side rebut it, I think that's a good thing, that people are seeing like, oh, okay, so I've never heard this side before. But rather than being caught, maybe being indoctrinated by these white supremacist types and not hearing the other side, I think it's good that modern day debate is offering this conveniently in this single video, where they hear that for the first time maybe, and they also hear the rebuttal and they say, oh, okay, so yeah, like he said this, but it's not as simple as he originally made it out to be. I
Yeah.
think there's a value. It's almost like a vaccine. The original idea of a vaccine was that you give someone a small bit, or like a weakened version of a virus or whatever it might be, a disease, and then you let the body kind of learn to grow and adapt and be able to fight it off. And I think that that's what these debates have the potential to be. And I'm just amazed that. So for me, it's very intuitive that I think like I'm surprised that so many people are upset, because I'm like, you do think the Nazis are losing, right? Like you don't think they're winning the debates, do you? And they'll be like, well, no, I don't think they're winning. And the common objections I get might be, well, but James, maybe it is the case that the anti-Nazi people have better arguments. But what if the Nazis types, what if they, maybe are more persuasive because they're more attractive or they're more charismatic, they have a better sense of humor? And I would say there is research that's looked at this question. So it's called the seminal paper, like the kind of the groundbreaking paper, of which this is considered theory in social psychology, meaning it has mountains of evidence behind it, many papers replicating it and finding it to be the case. is that when you do look at attitude change, when you do look at people hearing a case for something, peripheral type arguments, or you could say ways of reasoning, such as the attractiveness of the speaker or the charisma of the speaker, are less persuasive than central modes of argumentation like evidence-based logical arguments. So in other words, if you do think that, like I said, I think we all agree on this, hopefully, is that if you think the arguments against Nazis or these Nazi-like positions are stronger, which I think we all agree on that, well then even if the Nazi is good looking or charismatic, the empirical research, and this is from Petty and Cacioppo, 1985, is the paper that I mentioned, the seminal paper, suggests that the arguments are going to win out. That's what the empirical. And so I think for me, I think, well, a lot of these people's objections are, it just seems to be opinions or speculations. And I've given them, I give a pushback with this empirical data, and I've been surprised that some people, sometimes really educated people, with a couple with doctorates, where I say, well, here's my response in Petty and Cacioppo, 1985, the elaboration likelihood model is what I've been talking about. What's your response? Well, I haven't really read this stuff. I'll have to get back to you. And I think it's fine to ask the question and be like, James, are you sure this is good? Fair enough. But I'm just surprised that some people, they're, before even doing that, they go to Twitter or Facebook and they say, we're going to boycott modern day debate. And I'm wondering, where does this huge amount of confidence come from when I give just the slightest pushback with evidence and they just seem to disappear? Like they just don't have an answer. So
Yeah, that's
that's
really
my overall.
interesting. You see, I guess it's kind of like the the best part of one of the best parts of the American experiment that we're all in the midst of, which is to say that you can throw out truth and everything else in the marketplace of ideas, and the truth will win out. People will be able to see the truth, and or at least they should be able to see the truth in a situation like that. Yeah. So there's, I got two follow-up things that just kind of come to mind. One of those is actually another question that could be considered a criticism of the channel in general, and and so you know that we're friendly here, and I'm a fan of the channel, so I want to ask this from that perspective. But years ago, like in the 2000s or the mid 2000s, if you wanted to see debates between Christians and anybody else, you would go on Apologetics 315 was around at the time, and there were a few other places where you could find web-based videos, and you would find like J.P. Moreland or William Lane Craig or Gary Habermas debating, or Mike Licona debating all these skeptics on a stage somewhere, and someone like the Veritas, I forget, group, project, whatever, not the Veritas Project, but the Veritas something. It was a Christian organization that worked on college campuses, and they would get these guys and line it all up and set it up there. And you had one of the very best Christian debaters up against one of the very best thinkers from the other side, both experts. And I'll just say it, maybe I'm just horribly biased. I didn't feel like our guys really lost too much. I thought we always had good showings. And online now, and this isn't just because it's modern day debate, but just the nature of inviting, someone without a lot of credentials, is sometimes the person who's got the truth doesn't seem to do that well. Now, if you're an atheist, you might think, well, yeah, you would say that if you think your Christians are losing. But we could pivot this to think about a lot of the different kinds of issues that come up that aren't related to the religious debate. You've probably seen, whoever you are, your person defending your favorite position do poorly, again, because the other person was a better debater, or maybe they had the facts or whatever. And so as a Christian, so there's two questions here. As a Christian who is trying to run a neutral platform, I'd like to know, like, how do you go about thinking about who should be accepted or invited, and how do you feel about the fact that, yeah, sometimes our guys don't do as well. A lot of times they do seem to do better, but it's tough. And then if you want to take the Christian side out of it altogether, or the religious side, even with something like the aforementioned discussion about how people feel about white supremacy or whatever. Um, One of those guys could conceivably do better if you just have a bad debater. So there's a ball of criticism. Deal with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in all of these cases, so I think that the first question, at least that I was starting to pick up, and let me know if I'm getting it right though, might be if it is the case that many of these, let's say, Christians are losing. And I would admit that sometimes Christians lose debates. I don't know what percent of the time it is. It's actually a lot of people, I don't know if they realize, like, for me, it's keeping an eye on the debate and simultaneously the questions that are coming in for Q&A and stuff like that. It's I don't always get to evaluate the debate in as clear and fully with my full attention as much as I'd like. But anyway, so maybe it is the case that many Christians lose. I would say if you were to, I think you shouldn't weight it too heavily. The reason, and I think that's all of modern day debates, is the reason is, let's say as an analogy, we had the Olympics were, just kind of a random, instead of it being like the best from every country, let's say it was kind of a random selection. Like there's like kind of, random picks. And then they played each other with these random picks from each country as representing the country in those events or sports. It wouldn't be very meaningful at the end to say, wow, like the US is the best or whatever country is the best because they had the most gold or silver, bronze, etc. Because you'd say, well, but what if it's just a random kind of pick where it's like these different characters kind of ending up there? Then I don't know how meaningful it is. The reason that the Olympics is meaningful is because it's the best from every country. And the same way when it comes to these debates, like religion, for example, because it is true, I think that a lot of times debates in the atheist community, it's just very common that atheists, for some reason, just love debating so much. For every Christian I get requesting to come on for a debate, I get like 5 or more atheists, maybe 10.
Wow.
I mean, it's like there's way more atheists that want to debate. It's just more of it's in their culture or something.
Mhm.
And so for me, I would just say that if you see, two random guys debating, and in one case you see like the Christian lose, well, it's kind of like in the Olympics. Like if it was just a somewhat of a random drawing, like modern day debate, like I can't, it's very difficult for me to like really evaluate and be sure that the debaters are matched in skill or intelligence for every debate or any debate even. uh, so for me, I would just say I wouldn't weight it too heavily. What's most important is when you look at the best from each side, who looks like they're winning the most.
Mm.
And I would say that, frankly, we don't have, this isn't meant to be a put down. We have good debates for sure, and we have good scholars and things, but I don't think we have the very best very often. I think if you want to really get the very best, you ought to go to the peer reviewed philosophy papers from people like Plantinga or Craig or Swinburne. And on the opposite side, people like Graham Oppy, and reading on kind of the old juggernaut atheists like Mackey or was it? I can try to remember the name. The
Well, you always
inductive
hear
problem of these, I think,
today
as well.
Oppie and Sobel, and then you have Rowe for the evidential argument, Mackey for the illogical argument. But yeah, you could go to those on either side. I like what you're saying here, and I first of all, it's very humble because you've built this platform, but you're here to say, look, part of what this platform is we're not throwing Olympians out there sometimes. Now, we should say, you've had Michael Brown on the show. You've had, who are some other, Cy Gart has been on the show. And these are, I mean, Cy Gart was in Christianity Today. He's a scientist. Michael Brown, very well known. So you have had some heavy hitters. David Wood, I would qualify. I would count David Wood as a big dog who's been on your channel quite a bit. So, it looks like he's given you some nod to post some of his older debates, which I think is fantastic. So it would be wrong to hear my comments and hear me saying, "Oh, well, this place only has lowbrow debaters." That's not true. It's got some from all of it. And it also would be wrong to hear me say, I think that the Christians on there lose a lot. I don't think that. But I guess it's a question about how you decide to vet people on either side of this thing or any side of this thing. before having them on. And maybe what you're saying is, well, I do make choices. Like you admitted, the one guy we haven't had him back on, but honestly, I do want it to be kind of an open door where people who have something to say can possibly get a chance. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, we do want to keep it open, and we also, and I want to really quick before I address this question of like how do you vet. I'm going to come right back to that, so I actually answer it. But I do want to say I want to apologize if it came off the wrong way. If any speakers feel like, James, like I was on your channel and like I think I'm a good debater. I'm not saying they're all bad, and I'm not saying that they're all average. We've had some stars, like we've had some debates where I was like, wow, I was like that was, like we've had some uh like people that are like borderline brilliant. No joke. Like one of our debates was David D. Friedman, so Milton Friedman's son, who's I can't remember. I think he's an economist at Berkeley, against Richard Wolff, who got his PhD from Harvard. Like we've had some, and we've also had religion scholars, like top-notch religion debaters. And I also don't want to make it seem as if it's only about credentials, because some of these debaters are really good. Like Mike Jones doesn't have a doctorate, but he's a fantastic debater, and he clearly understands arguments that are at the peer review level. So long story short, I just want to be clear that we do have those on. I think that's kind of, it's becoming more common now too that we have those on, because with a bigger base, 100,000 subscribers opens doors for us. But in the past, especially when we were starting out, it wasn't as easy to get as many of those people, and our network just wasn't as big. We hadn't done it as long, so we had a lot of people on that were less competitive. So anyway,
Well, I'll tell you, there's a benefit to this that I see too, that I've thought about many times. Me and another friend here at Trinity Seminary have talked about this. Is that okay? If all you had was the PhDs all the time, well, there's a good chance you would hear a lot of the same things all the time. Like I cut my teeth on listening to debaters over and over, and they use the same arguments every single time until you knew those arguments so well you were thinking of them when you're sleeping, right?
yeah,
And that's great. It does kind of solidify those arguments and the reasoning and all the different criticisms that can come. But with modern day debate, there have been times where there's some person on the other, that is taking my position on a particular thing, or somebody else. And this could be like gun control or anything. It could be any particular topic. And after the first 2 minutes listening to that person, I think, I'm not going to get anything out of them. They're not going to do a good job. This is going to be awful. And then by the end of the debate, well, it turns out I've actually picked up some things precisely because they don't just say the same thing that all the books say. They've done their own thinking on this, maybe without a lot of the shepherding, that a university degree might bring, or listening to some apologist or counter apologist might bring. And they end up stumbling across a really good point that I hadn't thought of. So there is a
yeah.
benefit to that it does cut through some of the monotony and give you some new stuff.
That's a great point. There is a lot of variety. And
Mhm.
so if they're not simply, I don't want to be too hard on those that are kind of considered higher brow, that can be the temptation for higher brow debaters, is to only use the arguments that have been through the ringer and like the peer reviewed level, for example, or, maybe like Craig type arguments. And I think you're right that if they are not focusing on that as much, you may hear new ideas. I can think of one where I don't think she had any credentials, and she brought up an argument where I was like, oh, that was great. It's like all these years I never thought of that, and I had never even heard it. And I thought, wow, I was like, that's so. There's all sorts of people that, yeah, there's a lot of variety, and I think that can be a good thing too. But in the vetting
Yeah.
question, we frankly, it's very difficult to meaningfully vet. So this kind of selection system where people might, I can tell you this because like this is the field that I'm working on in my doctorate. When you select people for a job and managers say, well, I listened to them in that interview and I got a pretty good eye for it. I've got, my gut usually leads me pretty well just based on what I'm hearing in a 20-minute or 30-minute interview. Is the research shows that doesn't, it's not a good predictor of performance in a job. So for me to listen to a debate, it can be informative because there are those cases where it's like, wow, that person's much better, and there are some cases where they're much worse. But there are a lot of cases where it's like, okay, that person's like maybe in the middle, and that person's maybe like one standard deviation above the average. Like they're good, but like Are they, excellent? Like, eh. So for me to watch a lot of these debates, it could in some cases maybe vet out some of the worst people. And that I can concede. I think one thing that we do now that's almost acting like that is when we have a new person on, we almost always do a 2 versus 2 with them. And I can pair them with a good debater. It's kind of like in the movie Gladiator, where they would pair, you had a red or you had a yellow. I think they would put paint on your wrist or something,
Yeah.
because they were trying to pair like a good and a bad warrior. And it's like that when we do these 2v2s, we try to pair the newcomer with somebody that's for sure a strong debater. And that way, even if they are not very experienced yet, we know that there's one person on that side that can kind of toe the line to some degree. So,
Okay.
yeah.
What would you say is, do, do you have a debate on the resurrection that you are particularly happy with?
Let me think about that. I'm trying to, what would be the best one? I wish I don't think we've had Mike Jones debate on the resurrection yet. If we had, it would be his probably. I'm trying to think of who else we've had that's argued for the resurrection.
Did
I'd
you
have to get
have,
back to you on that one.
oh, I can't remember the name. Well, we'll let it go. There's a scholar I was thinking of that I might have seen on there, but let me ask you this. Of the debates you've had, like I'm thinking of debates from a while back, like you had, inspiring philosophy versus T jump, uh, only once, right?
Right.
What is there a debate that where with two debaters that you would like to have again, like have those guys rematch or talk about a different
Well,
topic?
the one I mentioned earlier, I have asked Mike if he's open to debating Matt Dillahunty on the resurrection at some point. I think that would be epic. I don't know, Mike usually he'll debate someone. He's kind of like, I want some variety. I want to move on. And so Mike will usually kind of do it once, maybe twice. So maybe someday, if enough time has passed, I can convince Mike. But I don't blame him for, he's kind of like, oh, I want to debate other people too. And all, he also wants to debate new topics. And so that would be the one that I'd want to see.
You did have Michael Shermer on Modern Day Debate to debate IP, and I enjoyed that. He's one of the old war horses, you know.
That's right.
He's not one
That
of the
was a
four
good
horsemen, but
one.
he is one of the old war horses.
That's true. And I Mike is such a good debater, probably mostly because of his preparation. Like Mike prepares like no other debater. He reads everything. There's no stone left unturned. He will have an answer for everything in his debate. And he's also quick on his feet. He's intelligent and he processes the information fast. And the other thing is, hold on, why was I saying that? I was bragging about Mike. I can't remember why now.
Well,
But
because we're talking
you just,
about Shermer and we're talking
oh yeah,
about,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
Thank you. I got it. Is that debate? Mike Jones did fantastic, and I'm not saying Shermer didn't do fantastic, but I think that was a debate that showed a lot of people that some of these people that you would normally think of on a pedestal, or they seemed like they were kind of like, oh, those are like the very best. Mike Jones has debated some of those guys. He's debated, like for example, Shermer, and I don't think that debate. Let's see, how do I put this?
You can say it. Come on.
I think it was pretty clear that Mike Jones laid the smackdown, and that Mike Shermer and a lot of these new atheist types, I think Mike Jones would lay the smackdown on Dawkins. That's not even like, nobody really disagrees with that, because
Yeah.
Richard Dawkins was like his, like, oh, like, ooh, was when he, someone say, I think there is evidence for God, and he'd go, which God? And the atheist would be like, oh yeah, and it's like, okay, this is like the stuff that people are getting excited about, is that it showed that a lot of these guys, that just because of the media, just the way it played out in the media, is that they were kind of propped up to be these, like, and that's the thing too, like if you watch Hitchens versus Craig, I mean, like, it's pretty obvious who won. There's just
For
no, like,
sure.
if you think that Hitchens won that debate, I'm like, wow, you really are, like, you seem to really, your confirmation bias must be off the charts. I'm encouraged that I think it was Luke Melhauser, one of these atheist bloggers at the time, like the Apologetics 315 era, before YouTube debates
Hmm.
were super common, like MP3s were common. You could listen to them on your iPod and stuff. And I think it was Luke Melhauser. It was an atheist blogger, and he was saying, like, Hitchens got spanked by Craig, which I liked that he was so honest, because some atheists were like, no, Hitchens like destroyed him. And it's like, what? He like didn't even address arguments. Like he didn't like at all. Like he didn't say
Yeah.
anything. And
Yeah.
so,
It makes me think that the people that are moved by that are, the rhetoric is a powerful force for them. We've heard this from in Muslim debates with certain types of Muslim apologists, that it's like Muhammad Hijab or somebody, like the rhetoric is really important to what he's doing here, and apparently a lot of people really respond to that. And of course, Hitchens, in a completely different way, was very rhetorically strong. He was also a smart guy, but he was very rhetorically strong, and could make it sound like what you were saying was just absurd, even if he gave no proper rebuttal to it.
right, 100%. Yeah, I think that people such as Dawkins, Hitchens, the reason that of the four horsemen, so you had Daniel Dennett, Hitchens, Sam Harris, and Dawkins. And of those four, it was very clear who was the least popular one. It was the one that actually would have been able to give like a much stronger case for atheism and against religion, and that was Daniel Dennett, who's a professional philosopher. I can't remember if he's where he's at, but he's considered like one of the best.
I think
And
he lives
he
in
was the least
Baltimore or
popular.
Boston. It seems like Boston, I think,
Yeah,
maybe.
it's a big time university. I just can't remember, and it's which one but he was, in terms of like giving good arguments, like someone who could really think, and also their kind of reasoning based on like what's the argument, very analytical rather than emotion type appeals, which was like
Mhm.
Hitchens' main, weapon by far. And
Yeah,
it
I think you've got it. I think among those four horsemen, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, and then I might put Dawkins before Hitchens, because just because of his science background, academics, all that. By the way, if you're hearing sirens, I'm 13 floors in the sky, but there's apparently something horrible going on down down at street level. So,
oh
but
wow.
yeah, I think you're back to your original point. Someone like Michael Jones would be fine. At the very least, would be fine having those debates with those people.
Yes, I think that absolutely. And if you're going to watch debates on modern day debate, and you want to, that's where it's more meaningful. If Mike Jones keeps dunking on his opponents, I'm not saying he's dunked on every opponent, but I am saying he's dunked on most of them. And it's kind of like, well, that obviously you should take that into account if you're watching because I get this all the time, and frankly, I think it's like this implicit peer pressure, or maybe just they haven't reasoned through this very much. But I get the funny thing is I get it from flat earthers too, where they say, and atheists, not all atheists, I don't want to paint with broad brushes, because there are a lot of atheists that I really like and they're really intellectually like sharp. So, but some atheists that you're like, James, how do I can't believe you've been running modern day debate for 5 years and you are still a Christian. And I'm like, well, like for one thing, if you watch the Mike Jones debates, I think like Mike Jones, like there's something there if Mike Jones keeps winning. So while there are some Christians that lose, like if you look at the best Christian debaters on the channel, they've got a pretty consistent record. And
Yeah,
the other
in
thing is,
fact,
go ahead.
there was a debate, maybe the last one that IP did on your channel. It was with somebody, I don't remember who it was, and he presented his digital physics argument, and the other guy was basically just like, "Oh, well, I don't know." You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I know which
You
one
don't
it
have to
was.
name. You don't have to name the guy.
I'm a good friend with it. Like I like this guy. He's a
Yeah.
political debater and he's considered one of the best, maybe the best. He's certainly king in the political debate sphere online.
Mm.
And he got to the point with Mike where that argument, you're right. He basically said like, crap, I don't know. I don't have an answer for this right now, which
But
I love his authenticity.
it was more that he just hadn't. I mean, because that's a weird argument that you won't hear popularly from anyone except Michael Jones, and so the guy just wasn't that familiar with it. That's not on him. You're going to ask me about quantum mechanics on this live stream. I don't have any idea.
Right.
It's
Yeah,
understandable.
definitely. And,
Yeah.
but yeah, also that, like I try to encourage people that when they do say, James, you're still a Christian after all this time. And I say, like, I highly encourage you to even if you know, I think it was Pojman Pullman. There's a philosophy of religion reader book that you'd get for a philosophy of religion class that you took at a university. And by a reader book, I just mean it has different readings from different philosophers at the peer reviewed level. You can get it on Amazon for like $5, get an old version. The arguments don't change that fast in philosophy. And you can read some of these, like you had said, like William Rowe, the inductive problem of evil, the probabilistic argument. You can read the classic from Mackey. You can read response from Plantinga. Is that like this isn't that hard? Like I'm not trying to be mean, like, but I get. I'm not saying you have to choose between YouTube debates or reading peer reviewed literature. You ought to do both if you enjoy these topics. And so I highly encourage people, you know, if you just type that into Amazon, Poachman, I think is, if I remember right, Philosophy of Religion Reader. It's a textbook you'd get in a Philosophy of Religion intro course. You can read some of the readings and voila, like you're starting to get acquainted with the peer reviewed literature. And I think that can go a long way. And it can also show people where it's like, yeah, I agree. Like in some cases, if it's random people on the internet, yeah, sometimes they're going to be these, what's the word I'm looking for? Mismatches. You know, one side just looks terrible, but why would you weight that heavily when it's two random people on the internet? I
Yeah.
I don't get that.
That's a good point. If the criticism is, well, look, James, sometimes you get random people from the internet and they don't do very well, then you just say, well, you answered your own question. They're random people from the
Right. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Is we have never said that. We do have some debates that are like, wow, like we're grateful that we had those guests because they're like highly esteemed and their arguments are fantastic. But there are many debates we'd never said that we were only hosting those. And we have been pretty open about the fact we even used to kind of have it in our branding, like our about section, where we'd say, you know, we want to give the average Joe a shot. And we
Yeah.
don't do that anymore because ideally we kind of keep upping the quality of our debaters. But that's the thing, is high quality debaters are in demand. Everybody wants them. They don't have a lot of time. So
I
we
think
don't
it is
always have the
pretty
best.
clear that there has been a trend toward better debates. I'm not going to say better debaters, better debates. You know, you may have had great debaters in the past, and they're better now. You know, but things have been in a good direction, I think. Well, you know, I don't want to keep you here all day. I do have at least one more question about debates in general. Since you've been watching these debates, well, I guess this is two questions. First of all, has there ever been an issue that because of one of your debates, or at least it began with one of your debates, you've moved on that issue because of or even changed positions because of something you heard in one of the debates?
I don't think that I definitely have changed positions on certain things. So for a while, I was kind of skeptical of the moral argument for God's existence, where I was kind of like, And then Mike Jones, I think it was in his debate with Skylar Fiction. Mike Jones restored my faith in that argument. In other words, he gave a rebuttal or a defense of it, I should say, that I was like, oh, okay, that's backing up the concern. That's a kind of putting to rest the concern I had with the argument. There was another one I mentioned earlier. I'm trying to remember her name. We haven't had her on as often as Mike because I can't remember her name, but she had come on and she gave a response to Judith Jarvis Thompson's. Is it Thompson? I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the violinist argument, and she gave a response to it, and I said, "Oh, I never thought of that. That's a really good point. Like I wish I had."
Yeah.
So there are
The abortion
arguments.
debates, the abortion debate. Now that's a good question. What topic seems to bring out the most people?
It's not probably what most people would guess. For some reason, it's flat Earth. Probably all things equal.
Okay.
I don't understand that. I don't, frankly, I don't really like those debates myself, but the audience votes with their feet. They watch those. Their retention, their watch time is really long, and they click. So I mean, they enjoy it. Like a 30-minute watch time for a YouTube video is fantastic,
Who
and
does
that's
the
what those
best?
get.
Who does the best job defending flat Earth?
Austin Whitsitt Gets It is his name. He's the most. I'm not saying his. Let's see. I'm not a flat earther, and I'm not saying his arguments like I'm not saying I've come to his position or something, but he's certainly a very confident. Which, by the way, it goes back to those like that Hitchens type rhetoric, in
Mm.
other factors. You could say, again, these are peripheral factors, and which is why I'm not so worried that, like if we did theoretically have Hitchens on, if he was still alive and he was dunking on everybody, I don't know how much attitude change that really does bring about, because so many of his like persuasive factors were not central. They weren't evidence-based logical arguments. They were these things like emotional appeals and confidence in how he spoke. That makes such a big difference in a debater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, by the way, I think even as sad as it is, I suspect that even his like really like pleasant accent played a role in part of his likability,
No
is and
doubt.
why people love listening to him. Is he I like I love his voice and his I like so anyway.
I enjoy
With
listening to the guy, but in fact, if I go back and listen to an old debate, it's hard to pass up Hitchens. Okay, this is the last question. What format do you think is the best format for online debates?
let's see. There's like this interesting phenomenon where Mike Jones has noticed it too. We've talked about it, that theists, and I'm sure you've noticed it, you've watched a lot of debates, theists tend to do better with more formal, you know, 12-minute opening, 8-minute rebuttal, 5-minute rebuttal, 5-minute closing, something like that, compared to the open dialogue. Atheists tend to do better with open dialogue. I don't know exactly why this is, but I think that there's a real pattern there. So I think it kind of maybe it depends on what position you take, what you'd want. I personally like the more formal, because for a fact that everybody's getting equal time.
Hmm.
Because even during the dialogue, you could have there are these things that happen, such as, one, you could theoretically have someone getting a bit more time than the other, and if it's not a significant, like if it's not a substantial difference, you maybe don't notice, but technically in a way it's skewing the debate in their favor. The other thing is, who's in the driver's seat of the open discussion seems to be a big factor. If you're the one asking the questions and like basically interrogating the whole time, that I think that generally gives you a good advantage, at least if you're asking the right questions. So I personally think that structured debates have more, they help you focus on the arguments themselves more rather than these other more peripheral
Well, and
things.
as a moderator, I would imagine that'd be easier. I don't know if you saw the debate we had with David Paulman and Godless Engineer. Did you happen to see that debate?
I think I had seen it. I think I hadn't watched the whole thing, but I know that I had seen it come up in my
Yeah, it
recommendeds.
wasn't too long ago, maybe a couple of months ago, and
Yeah.
I was criticized for not stepping in more and giving Paulman more floor. And I was letting Godless Engineer talk too much, and so I'm trying to learn how to be a moderator. But I can see the value in, if it was all formal, then I don't have to worry about if someone's getting to talk too much, because everybody's getting to talk the same, right? That's a really interesting point, and I'm going to make a note about this. Christians like formal. Atheists, on average, seem to, in your experience, seem to prefer open dialogue. That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. And also in the open dialogue, there is some research in psychology that religious people tend to be higher on trait agreeableness, personality wise, which just means that they're more cooperative. So, and I've seen this play out in a lot of different ways, such as like what format or topic the debaters will agree on before the debate. I try to like tell Christians, like, you can say no. Like the topic they offered, if you don't like it, say no. Especially because if they reached out to you, they're the one that wants the debate more. Say no and tell them that what topic you'd prefer, because this is fair to negotiate. You're not like bad to assert yourself.
Right.
And some Christians, not all, but some Christians maybe like have to can work on being a little bit more assertive. The other thing is, even during the debate, they might be more cooperative, such that they're like, oh, I was like, I don't, do I want to interrupt this guy? He's been going on for a while. And I personally, like, I'm happy to, and I try to encourage Christians to do this more. If you're in an open dialogue, it's fair if the atheist brings up an objection, even to say right there, say, oh, well, before we cover our others, can I address that? Because otherwise, sometimes it's hard for me to remember all of them. Let me do one at a time. That's fair and it's good. I think the Christian should do that. And sometimes, though, I'm not saying this about Paulman in your debate that you hosted, because it might just be that he's like kind of cooperative and he's kind of easygoing. And it's sometimes too, though, I've sometimes jumped in where I'm like, ooh, this person might be so cooperative that I got to advocate for them. And I have to make sure the other debater, I say, hey, one sec, I just want to, we haven't heard from so-and-so for a while. I want to be sure they have had a chance to say something. Sometimes they don't have something to say. They're just listening and they're maybe just reflecting and they're still not, they don't have a round in the chamber ready to fire yet. So
Yeah.
I would say letting it be organic, that's the way we've tended on modern day debate, where if it goes off the rails and they're speaking over each other, we'll jump in. But otherwise, we tend to, I kind of give you a thumbs up for letting it flow naturally and not over controlling or over kind of like forcing it, you know?
Well, here's my last question. Okay. And it really will be. Do you see it in your head? Now, I know on paper it's a neutral debate platform, and it is in fact neutral in the way you want it to be neutral. But in your head, is this a ministry of some sort, or do you see it as something you're doing ultimately for the kingdom? Is this what God wants you to do? I guess that's sort of the question I would have.
Yeah. So to use a natural theology type of, even though I'm not Catholic, to use a kind of a natural theology, are Protestants for natural theology at all? Is it pretty like pretty
Do
clearly
what? I
Catholic?
believe in natural theology.
Okay, because I was going to say I don't. I was like maybe I don't mean to limit it that much or to say that it's only used by Catholics, but the fact that I feel like God has gifted me for this job of modern day debate, I do feel like I'm not saying that I'm God's gift to leading debates or something. I'm just saying that I do think that modern day debate has grown and been consistent, and I'm grateful. It's because of the debaters. That's why it's grown, and because people have been supported. We get so many shares per video, which I'm super grateful. But the point is, I do feel like I'm kind of my skill set is happens to match with this. And so I do in a way that makes me think like maybe this is my calling. And I do in a way see it as a potential ministry opportunity. I'm encouraged that a lot of atheists, even because I was like, oh, this might be not neutral. But in the description box at the bottom, I put, hey, I'm a Christian. If you ever have a hard time, if you're going through a hard time, you can reach out to me at this email. And whether you want prayer or if you just want someone to listen, I'm willing to do either or both. And I'm encouraged that I've only gotten one complaint over the 5 years. And I've gotten actually for that complaint, I don't know if he's an atheist. He just said, he's like, I don't think this is very neutral. I've gotten more atheists who have said, like, that's cool. Like, I know you're a neutral platform, but it doesn't bother me. And I don't feel like you're breaking any rules or being inconsistent. You're just like trying to like subtly offer to help people. And so I'm encouraged that that's been, and there have been people that I've gotten to like listen to in their hard times where it's a ministry opportunity to try to support them as they process or whatever it might be. So some really heartbreaking stories sometimes. And so I feel like it's in that way a very clear and direct way in which I can do ministry. And I suppose like if my being honest or if I can be honest, and I think as a Christian, if we can be people who are, as Paul would say, like, you know, be above reproach, like if I can be a good leader, and I don't like, I'm not saying I am, I'm saying I can work toward this and keep improving, keep growing, is that that's a way in which we can witness when they know that you're a Christian. It's a little bit hard for me because I'm like, you know, I want to, like, I believe in evangelism obviously, and so I'm like, there's a part of me, you know, like that wants to be able to assert it through modern day debate, but there's also a part of me that's like, this is, there may be different ways of doing ministry. And I'm still, like I said, it is like in the description box, it's very frank. It's like, hey, I'm a Christian and I'm happy to be here
And
for
you're
you.
bringing on people who can be your voice for that, the Christian debaters that you have, you know.
That's so true. And so, yeah, it is a way in which ministry is possible. And I do feel like it's definitely my calling. I'd like to do it for a living once I get done with a couple of other things related to my degree field stuff. So, yeah.
Well, man, I want to tell you what, this has been a blast. I've enjoyed this even more than I thought I would, and I thought I would enjoy it. So I want everyone who watches this, especially if you've made it this far, check out the link in the description, go to Modern Day Debate, find a debate that looks interesting to you. If you don't know where to go, click that. Go find that. Well, we'll link it. The Inspiring Philosophy and Matt Dillahunty debate, and you're going to love it. You may not understand exactly what IP is saying at first, but stay with it. It'll come together, and it's going to be awesome. But this has just really been fantastic, James. And I'm really glad that we've gotten to, even if only virtually, look each other in the eye, because we've known of each other for a while and we've talked and communicated, but this is great. And I hope that our channels can be friendly for a long time. So thanks so much for coming on here. Is there anything you want to say to sum up?
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited that you're doing this apologetics ministry through YouTube. It's an interesting, oh man, I know you've got to go too, so I don't want to take too much.
No, I'm
But
I'm just worried about you.
there's this super interesting thing that's happening in apologetics online right now, which is Islam is coming on the scene and it's growing rapidly in YouTube. And Christian apologetics has been on YouTube, and there's like this interesting dynamic of, you have David Wood types who, if you were to push them and say, well, do you want to, kind of like loosely speaking, align yourself more with the atheists against the Muslim apologists trying to make their case for Islam? Or, so which I feel like David would kind of say, like, David, an apostate prophet who is a
Yeah.
non-theist of some type, I think, they are like two peas in a pod,
Mm-hmm.
attacking Islam apologetics, or whatever you'd call it, dawa. So then, though, you have Cameron Bertuzzi, who had recently put out a tweet, which I also was kind of like, okay, that's I get that too, which he had said, we as Christians and Muslims should be not partnered, but aligned to some extent in pushing back against the atheist influence online, which I can see that point of view too. And
It
I'm
makes
figuring
me
out, like,
think, James, it makes me think about that Christopher Hitchens, William Lane Craig debate you mentioned before, because in that debate, Hitchens says, well, wouldn't you rather me be an atheist than a Muslim? And Craig's like, I have no preference between the two.
right, yeah, that's right. That was funny. That was like the
Yeah.
funniest part of the debate by far. And
Right.
that was, yeah. So is that it is like that. And it's also, so it's interesting to see where things are going, where they'll go. And I'm excited, like a cool Mike Jones. I'm not saying that every Christian has to do a Muslim apologetics, but it's cool that Mike Jones is entering that sphere now, and not fully, still addressing atheist arguments. And I don't think Christians have to decide, like, are they going to align with one view more than the other. It's just going to be interesting to see the way things play out in the next 5 years, because people like Daniel Haqiqatjou are growing so fast. Muslim apologists, hijab has been big for a long time, and it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because we have like a
Yeah.
new participant in the debate world that stepped in, this third party, where it just changes things up. And Islam is
It's
growing at such a rate that, like, globally, I think as Christians, one argument is, we're like, well, atheists have a huge influence online. They do. At the same time, like, globally, according to the Pew the Pew organization, which is considered on the peer reviewed, Islam is growing way faster than atheism, and atheism is actually shrinking on a global scale as a proportion of our people on the planet. And Islam's probably potentially outpacing Christianity. Rodney Stark's a sociologist that's actually said Christianity is actually growing faster. But whatever it is, Christianity and Islam are kind of on this collision course, and it's just going to be, I don't know what's going to happen, but it's an interesting time. So
what I took from what you were saying is, whether this was what you intend or not, I think you'd agree. God has different kinds of Christian apologists out there and thinkers who have different sort of temperaments and things like that. And that's probably good.
right, I 100% agree. Some will have the calling to engage with atheist content or arguments, or and maybe they don't do either of those. Maybe they want to engage with Mormon arguments or something like that. I think that's totally cool. So I'm not trying to force or push anybody in a direction. I'm just saying, there's, on the online debate world, is things are changing, and it's interesting to see which way it'll go. So,
It
but
does
yeah.
seem like the Muslim stuff, in terms of its online presence in the worldview debate space, just blew up over the past couple or 3 years.
Oh
So
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wish
Well,
I won't keep you, but this has been fun. So I've enjoyed this
yeah, man,
immensely.
this has been a blast. I feel like I made a new friend, even though we were already friends before. But listen, everybody, check out Modern Day Debate and pray for our man here that he is able to finish his degree and find a woman if that's what God wants for him. And with that, James, goodbye, and we'll see you all next time on Trinity Radio.